Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thriving Students Happy Parents Summit. My name is Anna Alba, and my guest today is parenting specialist and speaker Bonnie Harris. Welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you, Anna. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Bonnie, I really loved the signature of your email. It says, there are two things children should get from their parents, roots and wings, by Goethe.
Yes.
And I
And
feel,
interesting you say that because I am starting a new podcast, and the name of the podcast is going to be Roots and Wings.
wonderful, you see?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but I feel like it's easier said than done.
Oh, boy.
So what do you think Goethe means by roots?
The foundation, what a child, the security that a child has at his or her foundation. And that does not come from being taught how to do things. It comes from the child's sense that I am okay, I am safe, I am secure, I will be soothed if I have a problem, my feet are grounded, I have a strong, strong, strong support network with me wherever I go.
And wings, how can we help children to strengthen their wings?
I think wings is about the launch. You know, we spend, as parents, we spend 18 years plus or minus being together with our children through their whole development. And then by the time they get to be young adults, they need to fly off. That doesn't mean they are not still grounded in the family. But in order to fly off, those wings need to start being developed from the time a child is born. So right off the bat, we have to start letting go, because we can't give our children those wings. We can't suddenly at age 18 plant them on their bodies.
Yes.
They have to develop and strengthen through the years. And it really is a process of the parent learning how to find that balance in being strong and being there and maintaining a strong family with limits and boundaries, yet all the way along being willing to let go a little bit more and more and more at appropriate times, which is why it's the hardest job on the planet, so that by the time a child is ready, those wings are fully developed. And I think we start letting go from the time we give birth to our children. We're letting go. Even if we're adopting or getting children, in a different way through a spouse, we're still needing to let them find their way. And I think that is one of the hardest things for parents these days, because it's a very, very scary, we think it's a very, very scary world out there. And so parents are much more, there's much more of a tendency to cling on to our children than there used to be, because everything is in the media. We see everything that goes wrong in the world. And we're so afraid, and we overprotect and we overcompensate, and we try to make things easier for our children. And we're not doing them any service by doing that.
I agree. At the same time, I think we should remember that it's the purpose of the media to show us all those things that are wrong in the world, and we need to open our eyes in what ways the world is beautiful and show it to children too.
Right. And we want our children to trust the world and the people in their world. They don't, we don't have to go out into the world and trust every single person on the planet. We create our own worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't give our children that foundation of trust, then they're going to go out there feeling very
Mm-hmm.
scared and anxious.
Right.
So, yeah.
Moni, so today we're talking about how parents can support children through academic years. And before we move on, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Myself, in terms of how I got into this work.
Yeah, how you came up with the program or what you're offering to the world, why you think it's so important, and what's your maybe background, what brought you
Well, it didn't. Yeah, I actually started out as an actress in New York City, and then I had my children. And after I had my first, we joined a parenting group in New York, and I just loved talking about raising kids. And my first child, my son, was incredibly easy. He was just happy-go-lucky. He was one of those just piece of cake kids. They're out there. But I thought at the time it was because I was such a wonderful parent. And uh, and then I realized, kind of just before I had my daughter, I realized that I couldn't I couldn't be Meryl Streep. I couldn't do what I really wanted to do.
Mhm.
And so I had to do something else. And I just knew it had to do with parents, and it had to do with parenting and kids, and some kind of counseling. And so I went back to school, and I got my graduate degree in New York in early childhood with a specialization in parent-child development. And then we moved out of New York up to New Hampshire, and I started teaching and designing programs. But in the meantime, I had my daughter, and she's the one who has really taught me everything I know. Not everything, I have learned it from many other places, but I didn't know where she came from. She just cut me off at the knees, and I had to start all over again and really learn how to work with her. And I was in power struggles with her. I was doing all the things I was telling parents not to do. And then I had to figure out how to really put walk my talk,
Right.
which I did. And
Yeah.
it changed our relationship, and it's been great.
And so now you're offering help to parents out there. And what do you think that we as parents, what support we should provide to our children while they go through those academic years?
Well, let me start with the problem. And the problem is that we come to our parenting thinking we don't have any training, but in fact, we have 30 or 40 years of training. And how we were brought up has all to do with our expectations of our children. And when we don't examine that, when we don't look at it and get clear about, is this expectation appropriate for this child in this day and age, then we're just going on automatic, and it's just rolling out, and it's usually inappropriate and unrealistic. And so we need to understand child development. We need to understand what a 2-year-old is capable of, and an 8-year-old and a 15-year-old. We need to understand a little bit about brain development. We really need to understand about temperament and the different temperaments in our children. My two are like night and day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about trying to get children to all be, obedient and easy. It's understanding them.
Yeah. So, for example, let's talk about homework.
Yes.
Homework is many children they have their homeworks from schools. It is parents' responsibility to give them reminders and do homework with kids.
So
Yeah.
the problem with homework is we're doling it out earlier and earlier and earlier. And I actually have a homework challenge for parents of young children, and that is to tell your child's teacher each year through elementary school that you are not going to require your child to do homework. If your child wants to do it, fine, and you'll be there and you'll help them, but you are not going to fight about it. You are not going to pressure your child to do homework. There are umpteen studies showing that homework does absolutely no good whatsoever, if not damaging, through the elementary years and even into the middle school years. It's if it's something like a game, like you go home and find out how many of this you have in your house, I don't know, something that's kind of fun to do, that's one thing. But worksheets and required homework is not going to help the child. All it does is create this friction at home. And parents feel very obligated, especially when they have to sign off on their children's homework. That a parent should never do, in my estimation. It is not the parent's job. It is between the school and the child.
Mm-hmm.
And so when children come home with homework, you can find out whether it's something they want to do or not. You can talk about what it is, ask your child what he or she wants to do about it, and be there, of course, be there for questions, concerns, anything, but no directing. It's not about telling your child, you've got to do your homework now. So if your child is a focused homework kind of a kid, then you can talk about what's the best time of day for you. Do you want to come home from school, get it over with so you can play? Do you want to come home from school and play so you can do your homework? It's very, and you want to make sure that you're not putting on the situation what you would want if you were your child, because you are not your child. So establishing a place, making it easy, easy, easy. And if the child says, I'm too tired, I don't want to do it, then leave that up to the child and the child's teacher. Now, that is easier said than done, I know. And there are many kids with special needs that need very special attention and very special help. And I am all for the parent being that help, but I am not for parents pressuring kids to do their homework.
Why do you think our homework is not for kids for in elementary schools? It's because they don't have enough time to play.
Yes, that's definitely one thing. They're in school, they're starting. I mean, some places are starting homework in preschool,
That's true.
and through kindergarten, I think you should be playing all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn, young children learn through building with blocks, through putting things together. They learn to count, they learn to read, they learn to write through looking at their environment, through going out and seeing what's going on in the world. There's so many hands-on ways of learning that don't come out of a book or a worksheet. And that's the way children absorb. When you leave children alone to learn, and I'm talking about the non-special needs children, but even special needs children, they want to learn. They just learn in a very different way. So we have to understand what that process is. But children are sponges. They are crazy to learn. And we don't have to force it, you know? And I think the problem that we get into is when we force it, children start hating school. And it starts off very young. And the kind of learning and work that an elementary age child needs can be well contained within the school day. And when they get home, it should be like, work is done. This is playtime. This is family time. The parents I work with complain that there's never enough time to talk to their kids, to do things with their kids, because they come home, they've got sports, they've got after school activities, and then they've got to do their homework, and you got to cram dinner in there somewhere and then get them to bed. And you know, it's crazy. It's a pressure cooker. And we're getting more and more and more cases of serious anxiety among school-age children. Yeah,
I agree. At least for elementary years, just let them get bored and explore, because sometimes they discover things for themselves we would never think of offering to them.
And with the internet right there, it's very hard for them to have that experience of just being bored and being creative and making up things that they want to play and building little villages and roads and creating forts out of the couch cushions and all those things they should be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Bonnie, so, but how can we teach our children responsibilities? So, for example, they have a project at school, or they need to get ready for school. Should we, as parents, be always behind their back and just do that and do that? Or how can we teach them be more independent and responsible?
Well, that is the $64,000 question. The number one way we teach responsibility is by being responsible ourselves. And that means being responsible to what we do in our lives so that we are the model of responsibility. And that means being responsible for everything we say and do with our kids. When we yell at our kids, when we call them names, when we criticize them, when we threaten them, we are not being responsible parents. And so that model of how you get what you want is taught very strongly, but the responsibility is not. And if getting back to homework, if you leave homework up to your child and you let your child know from the beginning, this is your job. You know, when you go to school, this is your education. It's not mine. It's not your teacher's. It's yours. And there is just an abundance of wonderful things to learn during your education. And whatever is required between you and your teacher, that's your responsibility. I will absolutely be here to help you, to answer questions. But when we have a child who walks in the door from school and he has a mother who immediately says, "What do you have for homework? You got to get to your homework. When are you going to do your homework? You haven't done your homework. You can't do that until your homework is done." Then he doesn't have to take responsibility for doing his homework. Right? He learns that his mother is the one who takes the responsibility for it. So we think we're teaching responsibility, but in fact we're teaching exactly the opposite.
Opposite, right?
Yeah.
So this is a great tool. We have, not all of us, of course, but I know that I have some patterns from the way I've been taught, and so probably I reflect those to my kids too. And yes, sometimes it does happen that I hear parents yelling, controlling their children, and it's a great tool not just to drop that control and let them be responsible for their actions.
Yeah. and it feels like you're jumping off a cliff. It's a huge risk, right? Because the fears, when
Yeah.
you say, don't make your children do their homework,
All right.
there's all kinds of fear that comes up.
Right.
It's like, I can't, what if
Yeah.
he's not going to succeed? He's going to fail everything. He's never going to do anything.
Mhm.
And that shows that you don't have trust in your child.
Right.
And that's part of the roots, right? That's part of the roots are we need to get to that place where we can trust our children, because that's how they learn that they're okay, that they're
Probably when that fear comes up, we should tell ourselves, I trust my child,
right.
and then it will just flip the coin, will just
Yeah,
get easier.
right. It's not so easy to
No.
do, but yes, it's hard. And if you find that you can't trust your child, then some of that is, depending on how old your child is, that's already learned behavior. So if you have been in charge of homework, if you have been in charge of everything your child does, you've got to first realize you are the one who's taken responsibility so your child doesn't have to take it, and start to let go of that. And it doesn't have to be cold turkey, but you've got to start to let go of that and talk to your child about handing over the responsibility to them, and then gulp, let your child fail. Let your child have the experience of not getting his homework in and the teacher saying or doing whatever, and or doing really poorly on a test, and letting that be part of the child's learning. That's called natural consequences. When you set a consequence as a parent and say, if you don't do your homework by such and such a time, you're not going to that party this weekend, then you are robbing your children of learning from the natural consequences of their worlds. You are making it arbitrary, and you call it a consequence, but it's a punishment. And you're breaking connection with your children by doing that. You're hurting your relationship with your child. You're breaking down that trust of your child to you, because we think about how important it is for us to be able to trust our children. But what we don't think about is how important it is for our children to be able to trust us, and to trust us to tell us anything and everything that is going on with them if they want to. They're not going to, but they need to know. That's part of that foundation. They need to know that they can come to us with any problem, and we are not going to criticize. We're not going to tell them what to do about it. We're not going to get angry with them. We're going to listen, and we're going to help them problem solve. So problem solving is what takes the place of punishment or consequences.
Wow. So did I understand correctly that if the child didn't listen or didn't do his homework, we don't punish him or her with not going to the party. We let the child go,
Yes,
right?
because the party has absolutely nothing to do with whether he does homework or not. And what we actually do, especially with older kids, like who have phones, that's the first thing we do, is take away their phone. And yes, they might be abusing their phone privileges, but if we take away their phone, we're often taking away their lifeline. And if they're having a really hard time in school, so we get more and more controlling, the more difficulty children have in school. When then that means we're going in the wrong direction. We're not understanding what the difficulty is. And that's what we've got to get to. What is it that's causing our children to not do their homework, or to just play video games all night long, or to, it's it's a reaction to an emotional state. And if we don't connect with that and understand that, we're not going to solve the problem. It's like, you take a phone away,
Yeah.
or a party away, and you're putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound,
Right. Yeah. Makes so much sense, Bonnie. Thanks for explaining this vision to me. And as I know that you had a talk to parents of teens and twins,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wondering what's the most common concern of parents right now of
Boy,
this age.
there are so many. One of them is, their worry when their children don't want to talk to them, but they just want to spend time in their rooms. And it's, figuring out how much of that is absolutely normal and how much of it is maybe signals of depression, because there's signs of depression, there's signs of serious depression with suicidal thoughts, all of which those signals can look like a perfectly normal teen as well. So it's that connection you want to maintain. Are you having meal times with your teens? Family meal is about the most important thing you can do through the teen years with your kids. Teenagers who have connected relationships with their parents do better in every single area that a parent is afraid of. Everything. Connection is the number one preventive measure. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean your child comes home from school and sits down and talks and talks and talks and talks to you. But it does mean that if your child has a problem, if your child is having an issue with a friend or an assignment or a project or a teacher, that at some point that child will talk to you about it. But you also have to know your child. And introverts tend to process all that internally,
right,
well before they bring it up to a parent. So it's making sure those little moments of connection happen. And that does not mean asking your teen questions. It means making statements. So whenever you have the opportunity, I haven't seen so-and-so around lately. I'm wondering if there's anything going on in your relationship. Or I noticed that your grades have dropped, and that could be a concern for me or not. I guess I need to know from you how you feel about it.
right.
So you want to get that conversation going, and you're not going to get it by saying, why are your grades dropping? Why haven't I seen so-and-so around? What's going on with you? We're certainly going to say, how's school? How's your life? I wrote an article once saying the 5 things never to ask your child right after school. The first one,
school? Yeah.
The first one is, how was your day?
Yeah.
And, and what did you get on the test? And how, all these questions about school. You've got to realize that your child, and especially in the teen years, they are so overflowing with stress and tension from their day. The last thing most of them want to talk about is their day. So give them a hug. Say, I'm so happy to see you. I'm getting dinner ready. I'm really looking forward to us being together. Tell them about your day.
Right.
And when you give them that time, they have the chance to just let their hair down, chill, veg, whatever they have to do. And then probably you're going to hear a lot more about their day than if you come right in and ask them. Of course, parents want to know, but kids don't want to do that.
Definitely. Wow, thank you, Bonnie. So I have a question for you. What do you think is the role of schools and the role of a teacher? How do you see education right now? This our summit is on education. Do you think there's something missing to it? Or maybe not missing, just something should be added. What's the role of like ideal school?
Well, there are a lot of ideal schools that are focused, that are project oriented rather than book oriented. Our children have every bit of information at their fingertips now, which we didn't when we were kids. And so I think the role of school needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to do that because it's got to come down from the top. So it's more about how do you ask the right questions rather than how do you learn this information. And also, I think that when kids can work together on a project, they're much more engaged, they're much more interested, and tend to learn more because it's also, it brings in the whole social dynamic as well, which can be very, very difficult. But I think that if we have, first of all, we have so many problems with so many middle schoolers and teenagers who are depressed, who hate school, who do anything they can to get out of school, who fall asleep at their desks, who just slump in their chairs, and they've got their phones underneath their desks because they can have their phones in school. And it's not working. School is not serving a great number of children. And what I would like to see in my ideal school would be the first month of school, absolutely no focus on academics whatsoever. The first month of school focused on relationships within the classroom. How do you build a classroom? What do classmates mean to you? And as you go into high school where you're scattered, you've still got a homeroom, usually. So it can happen there. But how solving problems with your classmates, building community within your class structure would solve so many bullying problems, so many issues. I mean, not all of them, of course, but it would teach children how to problem solve. We should be doing that with our children, by the way, from the time they're little. But schools can follow up with that. What do you do? Maybe hypothetical problems even, but certainly the real problems that come up. How do we need to handle this? What does Sarah need from the rest of you in this problem that she's having? Does she need you to give her advice? Does she need you to have her back? Does she need you to just be there? Does she need you to ignore her? What do you think she wants? So all kinds of problem solving issues. Building community is what our society is lacking and going in the wrong direction around. So that would be wonderful. And then lots of outdoor time. Kids can't learn well when they're sitting all day long. And then if there is a behavioral problem because of it, then what do? Take away recess.
Yeah, doesn't make sense, right?
Makes no sense.
Yeah, I so agree with you on building that community, developing connections, and asking for support or supporting somebody else, asking for help. So it's all like social skills, right, that help our children.
I mean, what's more important?
Yeah.
You can find information anywhere, but that is really important.
Moni, so I asked this question my guests. So would you be willing to share with us a funny or inspiring story that happened to you through all your practice, or maybe with your own kids? Something that just comes to your mind and you're like, oh, that was inspiring, or that was so funny, and you would like to share with us that situation.
Around education.
And yeah, maybe some of your work with children, or maybe from your own experience with your
Well,
kids.
I have a story with my 4-year-old. If we want
Of
to go in
course.
that
Yeah.
department, I tried very hard. I didn't want to punish my kids, and as I said, my daughter was my button pusher. She was the one who I had to learn all over again how to parent. And she just, oh, I just got so frustrated and angry with her. And one day, I don't even remember what it was. She said or did something that really got me. And I told her to go to her room. And she stamped up the stairs and she slammed the door to her room. And all of that, I thought, well, fine, she's not going to be happy about it. But I didn't know what else to do. And I was standing in the kitchen. Her bedroom was right above me, and there was a huge picture window to my left. And fortunately, I stayed doing whatever I was doing there in the kitchen. And then something just caught my eye. You know how you see something just out of the periphery of your vision? And I just, thinking it was a bird or something, I just glanced, and it was my daughter
My God.
running off away from the house. She had climbed out the window onto the roof of the porch, found where the post of the roof was, shimmied
Wow.
down that post, and took off. 4 years old.
She's resourceful.
Oh, and I just fortunately I saw her. I don't know if I ever would have seen her
Wow.
again if I hadn't. And I went running after her, and I really had to go quite a ways before, because I had lost sight of her by the time I got out of the house, and I didn't know where she was. I finally found her sitting under a huge bush. And you know how when kids do something they know they shouldn't have done, there's this kind of
Yeah.
remorseful, scared kind of look on their face. Not her. I found her, and she had this look on her face like, so what do you think of that?
Oh my
You're going to punish me? This is what's going to happen, Mom. You better figure it out.
Oh wow.
And it was like a real choice moment for me. I knew, well, I can never do that again because she would better me anytime.
Mhm.
And that's why I call her my teacher, because she really taught me how to connect with a child who was very different from me, and how to find out how she works, not to try to make her like her brother, or make
Mhm.
her like me, or make her somebody who I wanted her to be.
Right.
I had to accept her for who she was. And that was formidable.
Thank you, Bonnie. So that's funny and inspiring at the same time.
Good.
It's true.
It was a
I
moment for me, I'll tell
It
you.
was like
Yeah.
I was living it with you right now. I was my hands are wet.
Yeah.
And Bonnie, so I know you have a free gift for our audience, which is very generous of you. Could you please tell us more about it?
Well, I will give the audience an audio book of mine. I have 2 books: When Your Kids Push Your Buttons and Confident Parents, Remarkable Kids, 8 Principles for Raising Kids You'll Love to Live With. And I think for this audience, for this talk, maybe the second one, the Confident Parents, Remarkable Kids. So the book is about the 8 principles of connection. And that's the first half of the book. The second half of the book is talking about specific ordinary situations in just an ordinary day that's common to everybody: getting up in the morning, sibling rivalry, chores, um, homework is, and how I put all 8 principles into each one of those scenarios to help improve the relationship. So I hope
I'll,
people will enjoy
I'll
that.
post the link to the audiobook. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
All righty.
Well, thank you, Bonnie, for your time and your wisdom and sharing your experience and expertise with us. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And thank you all for watching. And please let me know if you found this interview informative and what's the biggest moment you got from this interview. And Bonnie, please let me know where we can find you.
Oh, yes. Well, my website is bonnieharris.com or connectiveparenting.com. You can sign up for my newsletter, which I send articles. I send an article once a month and I answer a reader's question once a month. So twice a month. And I have a very active Facebook page at Bonnie Harris Connective Parenting. And I have these 2 books and a workbook. And I'm also going to, hopefully this spring, be coming out with this podcast called
Roots and Wings.
Right.
So thank you so much, Bonnie, and thank you all. So connect with Bonnie and go and reach her for her wisdom and her knowledge. And let me know what you found valuable in this interview. Bye.